Well, I'm excited to be hanging out today with David Oldfield. Is that how you pronounce
Yes,
it?
that
David
is
Oldfield,
correct. Yeah.
Michelle Martin, from Potter's House in Columbus, correct?
Yeah.
And I really need to get to know people before I invite them on. I'm sorry, I should know those things already, but excited to hang out today and talk songwriting and building a songwriting team in your church. I know we have a lot of worship leaders that tune in to the worship leader coaching stuff that are songwriters or aspiring songwriters or worship leaders and want to get their teams right, and they just don't know where to start. And so really excited about this conversation and where we're headed. And before we dive too far into it, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves and the church and kind of your roles there, anything like that?
Yeah, for sure. I'll jump in. My name is David Oldfield. I'm the worship and creative arts pastor in the Potter's House in Columbus, Ohio. My wife and I have been in this position. We've been with the Potter's House for a long time. I've lost count of the years,
Yeah.
but we've served in several roles, campus pastors, young adult pastors. But for the last 3 years, we've been back actually fulfilling what we feel like we've been called to do in worship and creative arts. We're loving it. I get the opportunity to work with Michelle. She's great. I'll let her introduce herself though. We're walking in what God has called us to do, and songwriting is such an important element of that. We're plugging along here in Columbus.
Awesome.
Yeah, and like David said, I'm one of the worship leaders at the Potter's House, and also am helping to lead our songwriting team. And songwriting is something I have been passionate about for a long time, but probably didn't understand the spiritual significance of it until just the last couple of years. And God's really asked me to be a better steward of that and hone into that more. And so being able to like write with and for my church is just like such a gift, because it's like creating with family. And I'm really excited to talk about that today.
Awesome. And you guys actually just released an EP, correct? Is that
we did? Yeah.
I come down at the end of a worship conference, right?
Yep. Yeah. So we'd been working on that because we'd had songwriting community for a while, but really had not put the structure to it that it needed to kind of fly. Yeah. So we had these, we probably had 15 songs, and these were the 3 that we thought had life to them. And so, we just put it out there. It's called Fullness. All written in-house by the sons and daughters of those who grew up in our community. And we're really excited about it.
Love it. Well, we'll at the end, we'll make sure to tell people where they can find that and everything. But let's go ahead and jump into kind of this, building a songwriting team topic. Let's start with just the heart of a songwriting team for a church. Why would a church want to do that? What was kind of your heart behind that? What should the posture of our hearts be if that's a goal of ours?
I definitely feel like each community, no matter where you're at, has its own story to tell, right? Because we're all made up of so many different people. We serve in the same community. We were saved by the same Father, by the same Jesus, and He does so many different things in each and every church across the world, And so for me, it's really important to tell the story of who Jesus is in our community. What is He saying? Like, I know for us, we have different seasons where you go through things where there seems to be different emphasis that are put on, different spiritual things. And so to really kind of put a team together to capture those things, because songwriting in its purest form is storytelling, and really kind of putting material out there for the people that are in your congregation and hopefully beyond, to really grab a hold of what God is saying, encourage people with that, and to really, whether if it's a process song or a song that is just simply vertical worship, but all that plays a role in it. So for me, the importance of putting together a songwriting team is just as basic and simple as that. Let's capture what God's doing, put it in a form that people can listen to over and over, get it into their DNA, and then we can see these things come to pass right before our eyes.
Yeah. Can you give me an example of like something God was doing in your church that you said, oh, I can capture that? Because I think that's something that sounds really great, but doing the work can be hard to do. Can you give me kind of something to grab onto there?
Yeah. So I'll just give you kind of the most recent. we just had our closer worship conference 2 weeks ago. And so my wife, who does graphic arts, we were toying with, back in probably, spring, what it was going to look like, what, the graphics were going to be. And she was playing around. She wrote this line, "One heart, one desire to see our King lifted higher." Right. And it was something that was like so simple. And it was just so, like, I think Michelle said this and we were kind of toying with, like, it's almost like begging to be written.
Right.
And so we partnered with God in this worship conference. This is what you're calling us to do. This is what we're doing. And that set for over summer. And about a month before the conference, I call my wife and I kind of developed an idea. I call Matt Hines, who's our music director, Michael Oldfield, who's campus pastor, also my brother, and Michelle, and said, "Hey, we have a song. I got a crazy idea. Let's record it at the worship conference."
Yeah.
And so we spent that month kind of taking it through rewrites. And really, we took the heart of this conference, which is one of really the most important things that we do as a church community, and to take that one line and expand it into this song that people can see. And it just simply says that one heart, one desire to see our King lifted higher. And what's really cool about that is as we begin to sing that, and we recorded it at Closer, we began to sing that, our people are now saying, like, we want that song. Like, we weren't really like, out in front, like, hey, this is a song we wrote. Listen, we just introduced it and said, hey, we're recording it. We didn't even tell them which one it was. But they're starting to say, like, we're going to find that song. The song's in my head all day. And now I got people, from our city who see the shirts that we made, One Heart, One Desire to see our King lifted higher. And we have a pretty large worship community here. And that's like, it's almost turning into like the worship leaders and teams that are around me, kind of like a mantra. And so just like something, to me, it can come from like those really big moments that you have, like those tornado kind of moments, or just like those really simple moments of we're just building a graphic and then boom, here comes a full song out of it. So that's kind of the most recent place that we found ourselves.
Yeah, I love that. Michelle, would you add anything to kind of the heart behind songwriting and, how, anything that we just talked about?
Sure. And it's funny, I think, and we talked about this at the Closer conference. I taught on songwriting, and we kind of broke down 3 different reasons why songwriting is an important part of a worship culture of a church. And obviously, like, not every church maybe feels ready to take that step. And so that's not like a requirement. It's just something that I think a lot of people are interested in. And the first one we talked about was impartation, and how, I can't pray for you or walk through something hard for you or worship for you. But if there's something really significant that God's done in my life, which is essentially, not to say our songs are scripture, but, that's what the Psalms are. If I can take that, and if I can package that in lyric and melody for you and give it to you to at least walk with you through a difficult time, then I hope in some way maybe that could make your journey a little bit easier or even a little bit shorter through that dark time. And another thing we talked about was the history of a house. And one time I was in worship. I wasn't leading that week at the Potter's house, and it was almost like the Lord was like, just look around. And I saw so many, there's the people on the platform, which we love and honor, and then there are these like older people in your house who, like, I'm sure have, walked through cancer, have faced, divorce, have lost a spouse, have lost a child, like all of these things that God has brought them through, and all of the miracles that maybe they're not poets that are going to sit and write about them, but just the tremendous breakthrough that exists in that room, even if it's a room of 30 people, and thinking, man, it really is our responsibility as scribes to steward that well, and to say there might be somebody right next to you who God delivered them from depression, and that's what you're battling with right now, So I think it's part of that, like being someone in the times of the Old Testament, there were chroniclers, people who like had access to all of the ancient literature, and they would chronicle the works of God. And I think it's kind of about being that. And then one thing we've also been talking about a lot is like the mother tongue of a house. And this is something Christy Nordoff talks about a lot, but finding what that language is for your people, or those things that you guys always say, and putting that into song so it feels familiar for your congregation. Because maybe there's going to be things that are coming out of California or Australia or Nashville or wherever. They're great, and we're going to use them, but aren't exactly how we'd say it in Columbus. And so I think that can be a cool part of it too, to allow culture to influence the languages which we worship, because it makes it, I think, more personal.
Yeah. I love that. So, what are kind of some practical steps? I know you guys have had this kind of songwriting community for a little while now. Maybe tell us a little bit about how that got started, and then some kind of practical steps to building that, because I think there's probably, a handful of people that just heard you guys talk about that and like, yes, I've been feeling that. You just put words to everything that I've been thinking. How do I do it? So obviously that's probably there's probably a long answer to that, but what are just some practical things to get us started? Even me, before you hopped on, Michelle, I was telling David, I'm about to transition into a new church, and that's something that I'd like to take into this new church. And I don't know exactly how to start a songwriting community there. I've kind of lucked out and been at some churches where that's already existed, or where it's kind of naturally came about. But I don't really have an idea of how to form it.
Yeah. David, do you want to speak to maybe like what you guys have done in the past, and maybe I can talk about
So before my wife and I came back we really started trying to put wind in the sails. Before that, we were part of just like, as simple as you can put it, like people who just loved Jesus and wanted to kind of just write songs about him.
Yeah.
And it would happen, like we would take in our worship times, little just tidbits here and there and try to write around it. But for me in the community that we're writing in, it just came down to the simple start of identifying who those people were and gathering them to yourself and giving yourself to that community and just writing. And some of the songs, that we wrote were great. Some of the songs that we wrote were not great. So, really kind of even growing into that of relational equity, to be able to talk to each other and be like, this is great, this is not great. So to me, like at the core of a songwriting group is you have to have the honesty to really, you're there for each other, first of all. And so building that relationship of being able to be honest with each other and have the same goal and the same purpose. And so when my wife and I came back, we began to be more intentional about that. We went on a writer's retreat to where we just gathered these people to us that were a part of our worship community and that we knew were either songwriters, or they were just writers, or they were creative. And we brought them together, whether they played instruments or not. And for us, it just started as simple as like, let's go away a couple days and let's write some songs. Yeah. And 2 of the songs on our recent release came from that weekend. Oh, wow. But to me, like it's as simple as finding, like when Michelle began to come to the Potter's house, like I had no question, like she was cut from the same cloth we were. She's got this incredible gift of songwriting, this incredible passion. And so even for me as somebody who leads, I have the responsibility of leading the congregation, but also our team, like being able to identify those people. And so like from my vantage point, it's really important to bring those people to you. And then Michelle has done this great job of really making us intentional in what we're doing. And I'll let her talk a little bit more about that, what we're doing right now.
Yeah, so I think what was really great was like David said, already walking into a healthy relational culture. So I've tried to start songwriting communities this is like 3rd time's a charm. And this time's going really well. I would say the first time I was working with at a university and everyone was younger than me. That was actually really difficult because I think they felt like they could not ever disagree with me because there was this weird thing of authority. And I think that's something that culturally has to be addressed of, if I'm in the room, I'm not going to stop David in the middle of a worship practice and be like, actually, I think we should do it like this, Right. But in a if I feel like I just have to be like, yep, okay, sure, that's good. Like, that's not really he's going to be sitting there like, okay, I'm writing this song by myself. I'm going to feel like I'm not heard, so I think the good thing about, where we're at right now is we already have that healthy culture in our worship team. So, because I think if you have cultural issues, if you start trying to write together, they're going to come out. And so I think that's the number one step, is to make sure that you're relationally healthy. I think for us, we went through Christy Nordoff's writing worship book study. Yeah. So we did weekly Zoom calls with that. And that was beautiful for us because it brought so much language to things that we felt in our heart, and probably things, that even we needed to grow in. But I think the gift in sometimes using something like that is that it almost puts some of that stuff off on another person, for lack of a better way of saying it. And it's someone who's, been very successful in the industry. So it's not someone coming in as an independent artist or someone who's written a few songs and saying to a peer, hey, I think that's, we should do this. It's saying like, okay, here's some models of what successful writers are doing, and how can we use some of these tools to strengthen what we're doing. And I like her book because it still has a huge focus on being spirit-led. It's not about trying to get songs on the radio. It's not that that's bad, but I think it's really about, her book is about writing for your local church.
Yeah.
And that's what we wanted to do. So I think that was great. It just added structure. I think anytime you meet regularly, that creates a discipline inside of a person of, this is something I'm gonna have to talk about this in a week, or I'm gonna have to write again in a month. And just recently, so last Sunday night, we kind of closed off our book study with doing a writer's round, like how you might go to in Nashville. So it was fun because I had been to a lot of those, like in college, and we had food, we ate together, we talked about the book. Everybody got to just share like a piece of a song or a whole song. And it was a very low pressure way to begin to share music without it being in a writing room, And so there was like this, like tiers of intensity, I guess, because some people are going to have no issue coming in and saying, hey, here's my idea, maybe it's sounding good, whatever. Right. Some people who are 18 or, like, and not even to discriminate with age, but to say, like, I've never shared a song before, it might be really nerve-wracking. So I think that's just caring for your people and doing like, and being like, ankle deep, knee deep, waist deep in it. And so from now on, we're going to do monthly writers' nights where we kind of match people based off their strengths. And it's going to be up to those individual writers to steward that song in their off time. So, if you want to meet over Zoom and finish it. And then we kind of have just established like I don't want to over answer your question and not move on to something else, but we're also establishing sort of like a publishing type process of taking songs in through like a critique. That way we feel like and then even a production phase of, okay, then once a song gets through the production phase, we can hand it to our worship pastors and say, here's a good demo, here's a chart, you can put it, it's in Planning Center, you can use it. And those worship pastors of their campuses are the gatekeepers of what gets used, the writers aren't. So, and likewise, the people who are in charge of production are in charge of how it's produced. The writers aren't. So like having all of that clearly outlined, I think is going to be really helpful for us just to be clear and to be kind with people. But yeah, so that's kind of where we're at right now. And I think it feels really.
Could I add one thing to that?
Yeah.
I think, one of the important things is that you have to attach vision and mission to the front of that, because you can find yourself like years ago when we started writing, we had to answer the question a lot. We'd write these songs and we'd have these high moments of they sound good, right? But then they'd be like, what are we going to do with them? Because none of us were actually leading worship at that point in time. And so for us in the group that we're at right now is really kind of putting that vision that is not just attached to what we're going to do with these songs, as far as administratively, like this is the path they're going to follow. But then also you attach the call and the destiny of the house to that. Yeah. And what we've been called to do and say, hey, here's our goal. Some of these songs we're writing, it might just be for the house. Some of these songs we're writing, they could travel across the globe. You just never know. But we're writing these songs for corporately for people to connect to God's heart, and then personally for people to process life. And so to really put that out there to say, this is the why, that'll help. That's like the rope that you throw all the way at the end. Yeah, people can always pull on that to know that this is not for nothing. So vision is such an important role in that.
That's huge. Michelle, you mentioned something a minute ago about partnering writers with different strengths, or can you speak a little more to that, how to find those strengths? Like if you're first starting out, with your, you've got 3, 4, 5 people on this songwriting community, how do we find that?
Yeah, so I feel like I'm like paid advertisement for her. I'm not trying to be, but we used Chrissy's online 5-minute songwriter personality test. There's an extended version, like a paper pencil version on her website. And we were using that as well. Just because it's been super helpful for me, to make sure that I don't need to be in a room with 3 lyricists, because I tend to lean heavy that way anyway. And we're probably going to end up kind of, and it's always hard when those people are your friends, because you don't want to disagree with your friends. Right. And I have some great friends who we don't write the best songs together. Probably the best songs I've written have come from even the writing worship days where someone else has paired me with people looking very specifically at who we are as writers and our gifts. And not to say that, those are the best songs I will ever write, but I think through those experiences, I felt how productive it is to make sure, like, you don't want to have a band with 5 bass players. Right. And I think that's thinking of it that way. And having a male and female voice in the room, I think, can be really important. And yeah, I think as much diversity in that group you can have in age, everything, I think, is even church background, because that's going to give different language and help people come in and say, like, well, but I might perceive that way, because of how the church I came from or because of my background. Yeah. So yeah, that's been super helpful for us.
That's really good. David, you mentioned, vision and kind of having kind of a long-term play for songs, or just kind of knowing something about where they're going. And to me, what I was hearing, and it's probably because you are the worship pastor, just, your songs help pastor people, right? Oh, yeah. That's why one of the reasons that we sing songs. So can you speak to that at all, and just writing with the heart of a pastor?
Yeah. You have to, you make sure your songs are biblically accurate, and that they're truthful. Obviously, like that's our major goal, is to make sure that everything that we write it encourages, it lifts up, it refreshes whatever the song is meant to do, like that it has that biblical backing. We write inside of those boundaries. But then there's also, like you said, and to clarify that, this long-term and then the short-term goal. I feel like for teams and for our teams, especially really at the genesis of the new chapter of where we're at, is like, let's just give ourselves some victories here. Yeah. Let's write a song, let's record the song, let's release a song. That kind of thing. And once you get that wind in your sail, like for me as a leader of a group of people, that's where I always want to start, is how can I gain momentum? Because that just helps on every level. And ultimately down the road, I have this vision. We have prophetic words that have been spoken over to us that will be a church that is in the nations. And really, we have campuses in Mozambique. We have partnerships in India, and we're there. And I believe that this worship role that we play has a really important role in that. And, God even showed me in this dream I had probably 2 years ago. I was walking around in this room full of people. I knew I was in a different country, and they all had headphones on. And I tapped one on the shoulder. I was like, "What are you guys listening to?" And I heard 1,000 Reasons, which is one of the songs that was on our EP. Yeah. And they were listening to the song. And I woke up and immediately told our team, listen to this dream I had. I know it's prophetic, because we've been called to that. And so long term, it's really, we're not writing to be known. And that's something that our whole team really grabs a hold on. There's no desire to be the next thing. We just want to do what God's doing and steward what he's doing in our house, and allow him to breathe on that and to take that word wants to go. And we just have this really high expectation that it will travel a far way just because of the grace that's on it. But that kind of short vision is let's get some momentum. Let's actually create some stuff. And the long vision is the stuff that we create. It's gonna travel, especially in the day and age we live with all the mediums and outlets that are available to us.
Right. That's awesome.
And I think to speak to that, I've talked to so many people too who want to start a songwriting community at their church, but they're not the worship pastor, and they're not, maybe their worship pastor doesn't really want to. I really think that you have to have that person. You either have to be that person or have that person at the head, spearhead, because the depressing thing, and I know people who've been through this, is even if the worship pastor is and everyone needs to do what they feel called to do for that church, but even if they're yeah, sure, go ahead and do that. But if 2 years go by and they've never led a single song with their church's songwriting team, and I know friends that's happened to, it's or they have a song scheduled and then they take it off Planning Center, the day before. It can be a little heartbreaking. And so I think, to those people, I would say just keep praying and keep plowing, and God will open up that space for you where it needs to be opened up. But I do think having that relationship and having that person being excited about it, having vision from the Lord about it, not doing it because it's trendy.
Right.
Because you're not even going to write good songs if you do it for that reason. You're going to end up sounding like a song that's like half Elevation, half Bethel, half, you know what I'm saying? Like you have to, like, I feel like the song we did, Lifted Higher, sounds like us, and I don't really even know what that means totally, but it just, like, that sounds like something we sing, you know, like, and so I think having that person, wanting to do it and wanting to do it for the right reasons is just imperative. I don't think
for any worship pastor that's out there, like I feel the responsibility of the people that I'm working with to really give them a place to be who they are. Whether if that's songwriting, arranging, whatever it might be, like I feel like anybody who's in that position has to step back, and whether it's for insecurity reasons that they're not doing it or whatever it might be, you have to step back and realize, like, just as a pastor is responsible for the house, that worship leader is responsible for those who are serving in the ministry that they're overseeing.
Yep.
And you've got to put those people in a position and really partner with them to see the seed that is planted in your soil grow to its full potential.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's really good. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about some issues you've run into as songwriters, or hurdles you've had to face. I mean, that's one of them. If you're a songwriter and your worship leader doesn't really care what's going on, that's certainly a hurdle you have to face. What are some things maybe you guys have run into with your community? Or I know, Michelle, you said you've tried this in the past and it hasn't worked out so well. Maybe there's something there.
Yeah, I can speak to that. I think that when I tried it at the university, I think that the students, and there were some students who really had tremendous potential as writers, but they had so much going on, and it honestly was their job at that time to be students. And it was a great thing that we did it. I don't look back and go, that was a waste of time. We shouldn't have, you know, like, it's just, I mean, and I think that's how actually we probably all three got, Caleb, you and I wrote when my students and I came to Nashville, and then David came to our songwriting conference.
Cool.
But I think just like they didn't have it needed to come more from them, I think, for it to be something that became cultural at our college, because we really wanted to like release original music from our college, but it was feeling like music Michelle was writing and saying like, hey, when you have time after class, come over here and give me an idea, like that kind of thing. So I think it has to come from them. And they're still, to give honor, very gifted and great writers, but just it was not this season for them to give a lot of their time to that. And then I think also, you know, I've been in environments where, you know, maybe there's a couple individuals in that group that just like, if you do a free-for-all, anybody can come. I mean, you might get somebody in that room who honestly just isn't even very polite. I mean, you know, that can happen too. And then you're sitting there and you're like, oh gosh, I mean, one person really can kill a vibe. And that can be rough. So I think what I've learned in that is having those structural pieces, you know, which David already had in place, but those things in line ahead of time to make sure that, you know, you've got the right people on the boat with you, like before you set sail, because that can be it's a harder conversation to have later, you know, than earlier.
Yeah. For me, it was really like having the people and then understanding where they fit in all of this, from the songwriting to the production side, and really kind of understanding like, well, if I plug you in here, it doesn't seem really to be working well. You're great, you're awesome, but like, let's try it over here, and really kind of working through those differences and bringing to understanding to the room, like, hey, here's the structure of which we operate, right? So the person who has the last say in the creative direction of a song. For us, it really came out on the production side of things, and we're surrounded by incredible musicians and producers and all that, but it was really just finding and really having conversations of, well, tell me why you're frustrated right now, and then them telling you why you're frustrated, and then trying to figure out, okay, it's like a switchboard. I got to get all these people plugged in the right place, and listen when things are not working. Listen, and like Michelle said, like, you can't be afraid to have the tough conversations of you're not working here, I'm going to try you here. But that was kind of one of the things for us, because before that, like, it was, for lack of a better term, I was solo artisting it. I was writing the songs by myself. I was paying for the production. So it was kind of like I never had to work with anybody outside of myself. So when we started bringing that team element in, it's really, again, you got to step away from your pride if you're going to get anything great that's greater than yourself. And so it's like understanding like, hey, you're really gifted in that. I'm not. And allowing the input of the team, even if you are the final decision maker, letting the team kind of help and lead you and guide you toward that end.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to speak to what a little, just for a second, to what he said, it is very different than, because I release stuff as a solo artist too, and it's really different, and your team has to know it's different. And I'd almost say if someone can't tell the difference, like go write a song and release it and get it out of your system and understand who you are as a creative, who you are as an artist, whatever, what your little quirks and inclinations and things you really like musically, you know, even speaking just on the musical side of things, and then understand what's going to work corporately, and be able to clearly identify those things. Because if not, you're going to get all messed up in the writing room on a line that you think is just like so dope, and then maybe it's really quirky and be really cool, but like people in that room are going to be like, what in the world, you know, or like, but this was my story. Well, we're not really here just to write your story, you know. Your story is valid, go write your story, but that might not be right now. And so I think that differentiation is just a maturity piece, I think, that I probably didn't have, you know, 10 years ago. And so like I think just helping people walk on that journey is important.
I've definitely learned if there's something specific that I want to write about that's like my story, I need to write that, and then I need to ask for your input or your advice instead of saying, let's write this song together. I've learned that the hard way, because I've brought a song that I like, man, this is so close to my heart, and someone else writes, I'm like, well, your lyrics aren't bad, but it doesn't tell my story anymore. That's not what I want anymore. And it's hard to walk away from that and go, well, this is still the song that I love because it's a different song.
For me, I've tried to address that before I knew it was coming, because I know when you're bringing so many creatives together, you're working on a collective project, but then you've also got like me and my wife are working on our own project right now, so we're writing outside of that. And I have told, you know, everybody that's part of our group that I believe has the potential to release a solo project under, you know, the guidance of the Potter's House. Like, let's chase after that. Like, don't stop writing personally. Let's write these songs collectively, but you have a story to tell. And for me, like I really thought that it would be meaningful to give them permission to continue doing that while we're working on what we're working on. Kind of drawing that separator. So again, like for me, anytime that I'm building something, I have to bring clarity so that when something happens, I can come back and say, hey, remember what we're trying to do here. And so just kind of creating that space to say, go write your stuff. But like when we come here, it's corporate. It's collective.
What do you do when someone comes to you with a song and it's just bad, or an idea, and you're like, I have no idea where you got that or where you're trying to go with that? Because I've had that happen to me and I don't know how to be nice about it. So
there's almost like no way to, because even if you're the nicest, you're still telling this person, because we all know what it's like you put your heart out there. You're like, hey, check out my heart. And it's, yes, I've written stuff that's not good. Of course, you know, you've all heard stuff that's kind of like, so, but it's really like, I think giving them your honest feedback to say like, this just didn't make sense to me, or like that melody line was just like, it was hard for me to follow, or didn't make any sense, or like your chords are not supporting. So like finding like practical things to give them feedback. And for me, like I draw this line, like when you stand up in front of a church and you say, hey, we got a song community, we're pushing forward, we're going to release and write songs. That Sunday I met every songwriter that we have in the church. So like I'm not going to invite all of them to join the Potter's House Music Songwriting Collective. But I told Michelle, you know, we're gonna try to take a two-way approach to this. We're gonna write songs to Potter's House Collective. But let's also, like down the road, provide training for those people who feel like they have songs to share, and that way they have an outlet. But then they like, I can't control how anybody takes my feedback. I can only control what I give and what I receive in return. So to me, I feel like honesty and being as nice as you can, obviously with a smile on your face, saying that's not good.
For sure.
I think it's so important and so biblical for people to understand that their songs and what they create are not as much of a reflection of them as they think they are sometimes. And I think that if you can't be there, you're probably not ready You know, not saying you shouldn't write, but you're probably not ready to write corporately in a group, just because, like, you know, it can't really be about ego. Like, you have to be secure enough in Christ that you can bring something to the table and say, I don't know, what do you think? And there's been times, I mean, I've had people I write with that they've told me they didn't get something, and I like fought for it so hard because I was like, I think you're wrong, you know, like, but it was in a playful way, like, you know, and we would even hash it out scripturally, like, what are you trying to say? And so, like, having that healthy, but I don't think I've ever, with one of those rights, I've just never left feeling frustrated or upset with people, or I actually feel like those rights make me such a better person. And Lonnie Crump is a person, she lives in Nashville, and she's someone I write with sometimes, who is the most, like, she's just a structural person, a structural writer, and if there is something off about a song, she's going to find it. And she'll, like, apologize all over herself. She's like, I'm sorry, I just looking at this and, like, just hitting me weird. And those subtle things that hit you weird, but you just ignore and like, move on to the next part of the song that's good, she will find it and she will figure out what's weird about it. And it is so frustrating sometimes because you, like, think you're done and you're like, but, like, the songs I've written with her are so solid. Like, they're so solid. There's anything I'd go back and change. And so you got to learn to value that. I think if you're going to be any good, you got to learn to value that.
Self-awareness is so important in that.
Yeah.
Because when Aaron and I wrote Lifted Higher, there was a part in that song that I knew was funky, but I was like, I'm going to send it out. And, you know, my music director, Matt, he doesn't like delivering bad news. He's like, he was taking every ounce of what he had to, like, tell me that he didn't like this. And I was like, tell me, like, I need to know your thought. I know it's bad. I want, like, and Matt is one of those people who will not just say like this doesn't work. He'd say, and I thought maybe we could try it like this. Like, and to me, it's kind of like that's, as a writer, that's what I want. Right. Is to take something that I know might not work. I just tried it, you know, because that's, like, really what songwriting is just exploration, trying, failing, trying again until you find something that works. But having that self-awareness of knowing, like, okay, this isn't great in a collective sense. Like, let's see if we can do better, and knowing. But it's just funny because sometimes some people will be like, oh gosh, I don't want to tell you this. But,
right. Yep. So how do you know, like, when you've gone back and forth on something like that for a little while, how do you know when a song's done?
So we talked about that I'll speak to that for us. I think I kind of mirrored an experience I had in working with a writer who has a publisher, and kind of what that experience was like. And I loved it because it was like having someone very objectively edit something and not really tell you what to say, but just say, this isn't working, or like, and it made so much sense. Like, this, you know, of course he was a publisher with a lot of experience, so he was good at it, but he gave so many reasons that I was like, oh my gosh, of course. Like, and I just learned just listening to him talk. And so I really valued that experience because my friends and I, we went back and we rewrote. We worked probably another 4 hours on 2 lines of a song, but it ended up being the title of the song. It's the best part of the song, you know? And so I'm so glad we didn't settle. And so we're trying to mirror something similar to that for our team, and that we use, again, Chrissy has a songwriting critique.
I'll link all her stuff below.
Yeah. I'll tag her. I'll be like, hey. So, like, we're going to use that critique form because, again, it's objective. It's not me or David or Matt saying, well, we just don't like it. You know, it's just stuff that you want to filter through. Like, let's look at syllable count. Let's look at, are you repeating the same word over and over again? Are you, you know, and so we're going to kind of work through, like, a process like that, where songs, when writers feel like they're finished, they're going to submit them to David, to Aaron, his wife, and to myself. And we're going to just kind of walk through this process with the songs. And I really feel like with our team, because of the culture we have, it'll be a really healthy back and forth of when it's done. We're all going to feel like it's done. But it's just that last little, we're not necessarily going to say, like, all these writers say this song is done. It's done. We're going to go track it. Sure. That way, if there's just that one more thing that could be tweaked, we're going to get that tweaked that way. Our worship campus pastor in Mansfield, who maybe wasn't even a part of this, right, isn't going to hear the song and go, well, I like it all except for that one part, so I'm not going to lead it today. Yeah. You know, we want to give our worship pastors songs they actually want to lead. So, so that's kind of where we're at with that.
Yeah, that's good. So how do you, once it's done and you've demoed it, you put it up for your, your worship pastors can look on Planning Center and pull it down and introduce it. Um, is that how you go about testing the song, or is there a filter before that? I know you mentioned kind of starting some kind of writers rounds and things like that, but I just want to know kind of a good way to test songs to see how they're connecting with your church before you go back and record it and put it out there.
Oh, it's really clear. Like, yeah. So once we, especially with Lifted Higher, we got that done. We brought our rhythm session in, and they wrote an arrangement all around it, and then we took it to Sunday morning. Mm-hmm. And the people were really like, it was a huge, like, it was the first time they'd ever heard it, and because it was familiar to them because it was written around a lot of stuff that we had been singing. Like, my brother wrote this blessing, honor, glory, and power. And it was funny because Michelle wasn't able to be there on the first night that we were kind of working through the song. And my brother said, hey, what if we put this in as like a vamp? And Michelle sends a voice memo like an hour later. She said, I was thinking about this one thing that Michael does. What if we put that in as a vamp? Which to me was like super cool. And it was the same exact thing. I was like, she's not even here. And it just kind of showed the unity I feel like that we were already functioning in. But I've had the experience of writing a song, taking it, and it like Lifted Higher working, and then other songs that I've written and taken and not working. And then, so you do that, you take it back to the drawing board. There was one song that I did, it was just way too fast. And this was years and years and years ago. It was a cool song, it was a fast song. It was just, the words were coming out so fast that people were like, what are they saying? Right. So we took it back and we cut it down like crazy at like 40 beats per minute. Wow. And put like a swing on it. It was insane. It was kind of one of my first like test flights into this new writing world. And it worked a whole lot better, but still there was just a lot of, that was way, way, way before So Will I and Hillsong was writing, these manifestos of songs. Right. So back then it was kind of like, just keep it simple, keep it straight, that kind of thing. So I went through that whole process of, wow, that really didn't work. Let's take it back to the drawing board. And it's equally as enlightening when a song works. Obviously you've got that success, but it's equally as enlightening when a song doesn't work, because you have to force yourself, if you really care, to go back and answer the question of why didn't it work? And really to ask around, like, what did you think about that song today? And hear people's like unbiased opinion, because they might not know you wrote it. And so you got to hear what they're saying, because they might be singing it, in your community. And so, that's kind of our process. Up to this point is we've written the song, we bring our arranging, our rhythm section in, arrange around it, and then we put it out there. I know they did it at our Reynoldsburg campus for the first time this last weekend. And they said it went great. Cameron Glover out there, he's awesome in his team. And so really, and I would say even to a certain extent, Michelle, you talk about this, we're kind of still trying to find our legs on how we're doing this again in this new setup that we have. But that's kind of how it's been up to this point.
Very cool. Very cool. Awesome. Well, y'all, I don't want to keep you too much longer, but let us know before we get off here where people can find you, your church's music, your personal music, everything else. I know you guys both do some stuff on your own. I've been following your church, everything you guys are doing. So and there's some great stuff coming out of your community. So let us know where we can find you.
Yeah. So I'll let David speak about the Potter's House, but I'm on Facebook. I have a music Facebook page, Michelle Martin, and I've just been using one Instagram. I've kind of like compiled my 2 Instagram accounts to Michelle Martin Music. So there's now a lot of also Instagram stories on my kitten on there. Nice. But I'm supposed to be posting about music stuff, but I post more about her. But yeah, and I'm releasing some stuff in November, and I believe I was gonna do an EP in November. I believe it's gonna be 3 singles in November, January, and in March. And I'm able to, I don't even think, David, I told you this, but Michael Oldfield, who was the pastor of our Reynoldsburg campus, actually released a prophetic word like 3 weeks ago when he was at the main campus that was like exactly my first single. Like, it was really eerie. I sat there and I was just like, oh, And so I asked him, I was like nervous to ask him, I don't know why, but I was like, can I like use clips of like your voice, like in and about the song, like video? So it's kind of neat. It's all gonna kind of fold together, I think, in kind of a neat way. But yeah, so people can check that out. I'll be posting more about that soon.
Yeah.
So.
Michelle Martin Music, right?
Yes, on Instagram. Yeah.
On Instagram. Cool. David?
So personally, David and Erin Oldfield. Erin's my wife. I spell it E-R-I-N. We're on Instagram, Facebook. We just released our first single together back. I believe it was in May. I can't remember. Coronavirus has my timeline all screwed up, you know.
It's been a weird year.
Yeah, and we're also working on another project that we hope to finish up by the end of the year. And then for the Potter's House, you can go visit our website at pottershouse.org. A lot of stuff about our music program on there. But Fullness is the EP we just released, available on all streaming platforms. It's a 3-song EP, and it's fun. It's got a lot of good stuff. You can also find Potter's House Columbus on Facebook and Instagram. You can find it all there.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. We'll definitely check that out, and I'll link all your stuff and all the social medias and everything. But thank you so much for coming on. It's been great to have you guys. I really think this conversation is going to bless a lot of churches, a lot of worship leaders. So thank you.
Thank
you very much.
We'll see you guys.